The Merchant of Venice by William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare was a versatile genius in the literary world. William Shakespeare was born on 23rd April 1564 and died on 23rd April 1616, who wrote 37 plays, 154 sonnets, and 2 narrative poems. His plays can be considered as the best social criticism during that particular era. His plays consist of tragedy, comedy, farce, tragicomedy, and historical plays. And let me go through the plot of Merchant of Venice. The play Merchant of Venice deals with the theme of friendship, helping mentality, and mercy. The characters are Antonio, the protagonist, Bassanio, the friend, Shylock, the villain, Nerissa, the friend of the heroine, and Portia, the heroine. Let me go through the plot. Antonio was a rich and prosperous merchant in the town of Venice, who was loved by all his fellow beings due to the fact that he expressed his willingness to help anyone who is in a crisis. Antonio had a bosom friend named Bassanio. Even though Bassanio had a noble origin, he is not so rich. One day, Bassanio came to visit Antonio to borrow some 3,000 ducats in order to go to Belmont to possess Portia, his ladylove, as his life partner. Unfortunately, Antonio could not help Bassanio because Antonio had spent all his money in his ships. Thus, both Antonio and Bassanio went to Shylock to borrow the money. Shylock was a greedy moneylender who was very cruel and crooked, who charged very high interest from merchants, thus he became so rich. However, Shylock offered the money for Antonio without any interest. Shylock put forward a demand that Antonio must sign a bond. According to that bond, if Antonio fails to repay the money in time, he will lose a pound of flesh to be cut off from his body. Antonio accepted the bond even though Bassanio raised preventive arguments. Thus, they got the money which Antonio handed over to Bassanio. Then the story moves to Belmont, the city of Portia. In Belmont, Bassanio broke the challenge raised by Portia's father. Portia's father made a challenge as per which the suitor of Portia must select the casket in which Portia's picture deposited. Bassanio rejected the golden and silver caskets by saying that all that glitters is not gold. Thus he chose the third casket made of lead in which Portia's picture deposited, and he won Portia's hand in marriage. However, the happiness did not long last. A messenger came there with a letter from Antonio that contained the sad fate faced by Bassanio's friend. Bassanio's friend means Antonio. According to that letter, Antonio had lost all the ships in the sea so that he could not repay the money in time. When Bassanio became fearful and his face became pale, Portia inquired about the matters. Bassanio confessed all those things to Portia. Then Portia expressed her love for Bassanio by saying that I am willing to marry you as quick as possible to give you the rightful inheritance to my money. Thus, Bassanio returned to Venice to save his friend Antonio. Then story again moved back to Venice, the city of Antonio, where the trial of the strange case is going to take place. Finally, the day of trial arrived. A large crowd gathered in the court to see the most outrageous and strangest case in the history. The Duke of Venice presided over the court. He pleaded Shylock to be merciful to his fellow beings. But in the end, Shylock replied that he do not want mercy if the God grants him justice. Even though Bassanio offered the money to Shylock, he was unwilling to accept the money. Then Portia arrived there in disguise. Portia appeared in the court of Venice as a lawyer. Balthasar and Nerissa accompanied her as lawyer's clerk. Now Portia begins to control the trial. Portia attempts to find out some loopholes in the bond. Thus, finally Portia found out that the bond only offered Shylock a pound of flesh and not a drop of blood. Portia argued to Shylock that Shylock must cut a pound of flesh from Antonio's body without shedding a drop of blood. And she also added that if Shylock sheds a drop of Antonio's blood, his life should be placed at the feet of the Duke of Venice and his wealth should be confiscated by the state. Then the story comes to an end with Antonio's release and happiest climax. All the wealth of Shylock's were confiscated by the state, and half of the wealth was given to Antonio, and the rest of the wealth went to the state. The Duke of Venice pardoned to Shylock by saying that mercy is the most beautiful and dignified values in the world. Here, Shakespeare attempts to explore the politics of attitude towards Jews. The people all over the world considered Jews as the most wretched people in the world. Thus, he attributed the most wretched characteristics to the Jewish moneylender Shylock. Here, Shakespeare also shares the same kind of hatred towards Jews that was prevalent during that particular time.